rolling hills of Italy, the IMSA iRacing series will head as it winds its way to the end of the first of 4 seasons in 2024. What better way than an undulating roller coaster that recently joined the iRacing service? Welcome to Mugello, where alongside myself, Arjuna Kenkipati, Ewan O'Leary on hand to call you through all of the action as the 3 classes of competition get ready to go. Ewan, this is not necessarily a traditional endurance multi-class racing venue, but I don't think it's going to diminish the level of excitement, the level of chaos that we're in for here today.
It's probably going to increase it, in all honesty. There's not many real-life endurance multi-class races around this venue, and so there's even less in iRacing, which, as you say, is still a very new venue to this service. So people will still be learning the ropes a little bit as well. And in fact, not even many prototypes go around here on a day-to-day basis, to be honest. So there's going to be a bit of a voyage of discovery this week for everyone.
It's a track that actually I feel like that even in the sim, when you're driving just in a monitor, on a monitor like many will, you don't get that real sense of the undulation. Jump into VR and it's a very different perspective. Here's a look at the schedule though as we head into the first of the, the final 4 races of this first season of the year. Aragon, another maybe slightly unfamiliar track left to come after this before a street circuit, in effect circuit Gilles Villeneuve, and a trip over to Silverstone to close out the season in what has been an exciting campaign for these drivers. Of course, last couple of weeks have seen us head to Sebring as well as the Nürburgring Nordschleife. Where else could he do that other than in the virtual world, especially given the cars that are available to the drivers? All 4 of the hybrids that competed in the Rolex 24 in the GTP class are available, along with the Dallara P217 in the LMP2 class, and then 6 different options from GTDs to work on through. iRacing very much represented handily in the GTP and the GTD classes.
Yeah, great variety in those classes, and they're the ones that are going to be talked about most, I reckon, and obviously most strong, if you want to put it that way, in terms of driving as well. But LMP2 is going to be a good race too. It's 3-class racing, which is really what makes it a challenge, especially for those LMP2s, to be fair, overtaking and getting past by cars at the same time. So interesting race ahead, and as we said, not much practice around here in terms of multi-class traffic from the past, like at Daytona and Sebring, that we've had in the last few weeks.
And we still have the full complement of cars getting ready to go. 3 splits of competition from what I could see, and 49, I think, cars qualifying right now, of course, split up into their 3 classes. It's 13,000s that split Alessandro Sfinzone from Sam Michaels at the top of the GTP standings, while it's almost 2/10 between Oskari Sarainen and Dylan Bittman for your LMP2 pole position. GTTs, currently a Porsche leads a Ferrari there, with Mark Schrull in front of Julian Fernandez, and only 91 thousandths between the 2 of them. Tight fields in qualifying, especially important, I think, in those LMP2 and GTD classes, because they're going to start at the same time as the GTPs.
It is especially important, and just look at those gaps between 1 and 2. The biggest gap being in LMP2, just over a 10th and 3/4, or just under a 10th and 3/4 in that middle class. So very encouraging for this race. And that barrel down in towards turn number 1 is going to be even more exciting as a result. A slight plunge downhill, it's pretty open on the way in, and it is a hairpin, but it's fairly flowing on the way through. So shouldn't be too bad, but things can go wrong at a hairpin, so we'll see what happens with such a close field going towards the start here in a moment.
So I get the sense as well that with the 1 pit stop that is expected from these drivers, that we're probably going to see at least 1 or 2 passes of traffic. I think the difference between the GTPs and the GTD is going to be quite interesting. LMP2s not actually that far off of the GTPs in terms of times. We're only talking about 4 full seconds between the 2 pole position sitters.
Exactly, and that is a bit of an issue. It's become a bit of an issue, I've got to say, with the speed of these classes getting close together, especially the GT3s, and so that's going to be a real issue. It just depends really on where you make your speed. That's the difference, I guess, with these cars. They make their speed in different ways around a circuit like this, and I know it is mostly twists and turns, but even so, it could be an issue. Let's see.
Well, the drivers have just finished up their qualifying session. We get a full formation lap with which to work, so that means plenty of time to talk through the grid, talk through expectations, and then finally get set to go racing. So let's run down trackside as you see the field beginning its formation, the cloud cover descending as well, and a 1:31.366 for Alessandro Sfinzone will give him pole position alongside the Movano Racing driver Sam Michaels, who I actually saw down at the Daytona International Speedway enjoying the Rolex 24. Thiago Rodriguez then alongside Dominic Guntmeyer on the second row, with Alexei Nogue alongside Balashag Troche for 5th and 6th positions. Go back to 7 to find George Brabner in an Acura, Ruben Lasso alongside on his outside, Curtis Webb and then Chris Shorter make up the rest of row 5 and the rest of the top 10, with Jan Korbs and then Paul Jouffreau through the rest of the top 12. Still going in what is a stacked GTP field, mostly of course in Acuras, but the one BMW mixed up in Chris Shorter, Declan Webb, Simone Nuchera, Ryan O'Connor, Alexei Selesnev, and then Edward Middleton and Fabio Ciambella make up the rest of your top 18. And I think we've still got 2 more drivers, only with 1 on the board though, Hendrik Ibsen and Jack Booster. 20 of these GTPs ready to rumble around Circuit Mugello. In the LMP2s, hoping to go ka-chow from the front, it's Oskari Sarainen, Dylan Bittman almost 2/10 off on the front row, and then the ATRS colors of Morten Agerson and Tom Schneider, 3rd and 4th positions. Felix Rupert, Mike Page share row 3 with Christian Pereira 1 second off back in 7th. Marjan Martinovic will be alongside him in the Tower Motorsport liveried car. Mikhail Machera, Sheldon Muscat, and then Patrick Rathart through the 11 LMP2s. Not that many of them getting ready to go in the field. Last but not least, GTD entries, Porsche Ferrari on the front row, and Mark Schruller doing enough to lead us to the green in class. Julian Fernandez will be alongside in the Zenith Esports machine, Federico Chris Fooley, and then Obed Salem, 3rd and 4th in the class, with Christian Moore and then Casper Umanen, 5th and 6th positions. 7th for Tim Van Stronsen, Jack Thompson will be on his outside, with Raphael Raflaski and Aaron Quinn, 9th and 10th. Lemmy Mishka, Aidan Campbell behind them, and still going through the field, Takahiro Kubo, Miguel Questa, Thomas Seyfert, Fabian Alex, and then Metin Kirdas through the 17 GTD machines. So monster field getting ready to go, and Ewan, I think traffic, as we've been talking about, going to be quite intriguing.
It is, but as we've just seen, there are 20 GTPs supposedly on the field at the moment. That makes up easily the biggest proportion of any of the classes, so that makes things slightly easier for them in that they've only got the other half of the field to overtake rather than the other 2/3. But for the GTs, yeah, that's bad news in terms of the GTPs. This first run through traffic is going to completely decimate that GT field. Hopefully not in terms of crashes, but just in terms of gaps that will inevitably be opened up.
Look how much of a gap's been left between the LMP2s and the GTP cars, and I'm assuming that will extend back to the GTDs, who are only now seemingly getting underway for their full formation lap. So in fact, maybe just a couple of the cars beginning to roll. There's the rest of the field. No, it's just it was just the camera. It was confusing me slightly. Yeah, well, I think the start's going to be quite difficult in the GTD field in particular, because they're going to have basically half the lap still left to go as your GTPs head off to what is maybe the more fun part of the lap, in my opinion. This is where the undulation really makes itself known.
Yeah, it certainly does. I mean, I think the circuit's fun all the way through, by the way. It's just fantastic, and especially in a GTP, maybe not in race trim, you might have it trimmed down a little bit more than is ideal, but if you're just on your own driving for a bit of fun, stick a load of downforce on one of these GTPs and fly through the corners. I bet it's an absolute whale of a time. These turns through here, 6, 7, 8, 9, all fantastic, and as you say, the undulation as well make it very challenging, but I bet these cars are absolutely glued to the road throughout there.
Yeah, these will be pretty planted, you have to assume. And then down into turn 10, track falls away from you. This is where maybe on braking, these cars are going to struggle a lot more than the GTDs with their ABS, their traction control on corner exit as well. It's going to be about give and take, especially in traffic management the first time around. You mentioned 20 of the GTPs. There are, of course, 17 of the GTDs and only 11 of the P2s. So, if anything, expect the prototypes, the LMP2s, to be the most bullied of them all, I'd assume, in our traffic interactions.
I would say so, but I think some people think that that's always the case. You know, if you're having to overtake GTs and get overtaken by GTPs, and you're considerably outnumbered, as you always are in the IMSA Racing Series, then it's always the most difficult class. I don't always go along with that train of thought, but I think it's a pretty good one for now in this particular split, because, as you say, they're vastly outnumbered in a big field.
Outnumbered and possibly going to be outgunned when it comes to some of the desperation blocks that are made by GTTs and not letting P2s pass, and desperation sends, on the other hand, from your GTPs who get ready to go. Remember, it was relatively tidy of a qualifying lap for both of the drivers on the front row. Margins at the front not that large. It should be a wild one here, to say the very least. As ever in this IMSA iRacing Series, 45 minutes thrown onto the clock. Porsche pace car off and away, not to be seen. It's now from green to checkered, as simple as that. Not a long hold by any means for Alessandro Sfinzone, who gets us underway here at Circuit Mugello. And they're going to streak out on the run down into the opening corner. 3 wide further back in the pack, but no such qualms at the front. It's single file and trouble-free. Sfinzone from Michaels. Rodriguez then holds on to third as Kumpelmeyer tries to hold on to the positions further behind. Here come the LMP2 cars, now already getting ready to stamp onto the brakes for the very first time of asking, and with Lightning McQueen's number 30, and not number 95 in this race, being able to take the point and run through. GTD's had a tidy start, and Mark Struhl holds on to the lead in his Porsche as Ferraris and then Porsches run behind in the battles.
Good starts all round for the pole sitters in all 3 classes, but Alessandro Sfinzone, I've got to say, I think caught everybody else off guard by going so early. They were barely past the pit entrance lane on the front straight before he went for it, and that meant the top 5 or so were single file going down towards turn 1. It meant there was a clean start in GTP, and by the looks of things, we've had clean starts in all 3 of our categories, which is a minor miracle really, considering the first turn, but great to see.
I think you're right. All 48 contenders still pointed in the right direction, and not too many movers and shakers, with the exception of Declan Webb at the back of the GTP classes, maybe just taking a conservative approach on this very first lap. Having said that, the GTDs are starting to get tangled up with one another. RG Bargies has seen Jack Thompson, Aidan Campbell off the road. Everyone else able to squeak on through and survive. We look at Rafael Rafalski as he works now alongside in the Porsche battles, as he'll lose out on momentum.
Yeah, safe to say the Porsches are the most popular car back here at the moment, in towards the very long and slightly painful turn 12 in these cars, and that was very wide indeed in the background, and so they'll sort themselves out through this chicane, which is a little bit more of a challenge in these GTs than it is for those prototypes, no doubt about that. But there are the leaders. Mark Scholler has made a good start in the 31 Porsche, and a lone Ferrari of Julian Fernandez, at least at the front of the field, looking for that lead. And in fact, there's another one right there as well. Bit better balanced actually at the front rather than at the back, where it is all Porsches.
Asper Ullmann is also in an Audi, but yeah, there's a definite bias to the Porsche power here today in the GT3 category. There's the look at the Kinetic Racing car that gets involved in something that happens in front of him, and so Campbell runs into the side, I believe, of Jack Thompson. They go 3 wide into the corner. He's in the middle, and then ping pong is played, and he's unfortunately speared off the track.
And Aidan Campbell, unfortunately, back down to pit lane already after the opening lap. Fortunately for us, the only driver to have to come down pit lane, but we have had one, unfortunately. To be honest, I'm quite surprised they managed to get 3 wide even at this point in the lap. That's quite remarkable going into turn 8.
I mean, never say never with GTD cars. They just find a way. They have this habit of being able to do so. Chris Shorter now in front of Paul Jouffreau, as well as a handful of others. I see George Brabner's in the mix, Jan Korbs, Curtis Webb, then as well, if you go all the way back down to 12th position as we now head back up to turn 1. Chris Shorter, let's give him some credit, by the way, is a jink behind. George Brabner trying to lunge it up the inside. The sole BMW in a sea of Acuras.
Is that actually Chris Shorter, by the way? Like the Chris Shorter?
The impulse driver, Chris Shorter, I believe so.
I thought so. It's just because he's got the second next to his name, but anyway, that's another issue.
Smurf
Yeah,
accounts.
Doing okay. I didn't want to mention it. Doing okay in a BMW into 8th place, but I was just thinking to myself, it was only not so long ago anyway. It's towards the end maybe of 2023, sort of Petit Le Mans times, where the Acura really wasn't very fancied at all. It was not very good around some circuits especially, but at the moment it just seems like it can't be stopped in the early part of 2024. Quite remarkable really, as Paul Geoffroy is going to make full use of that now to go down the inside of Chris Shorter and make it up to 8th place.
Well, it's not half bad as well, I tell you, from both drivers to see that coming and down the hill into that braking zone that we talked about to give room. George Brabner wasn't hanging around, and well, he likes to write about feeder series racing. He's feeding himself into the action, not side by side through here. It goes first right, left, then back right. He's gonna hold on and now jig back to the inside. That was an aggressive bit of driving into the final corner.
But it needed to happen, Brabner. That was his best chance to get past Chris Shorter, and he fully made that one work into turn 12. But everybody now is closed up right behind. Jan Korps is very close at looking for this move, but the BMW seems all right in a straight line. Tucks right in under the slipstream, although running out of legs towards the end here. Korps goes down the inside for 10th position. Not very deep on the brakes though, and Shorter will keep the position with a little bit of contact.
Yeah, it was a little bit of a hip check, but all's fair, I guess, in love and war. I've got to say, I'm loving this one. Only 5 minutes in at the front, Svensson held on to his advantage from Sam Michaels, but by no means being allowed to run away. Just look at the commitment right on board with the number 1 Movano Sim Racing entry is Sam Michaels, now in 5th gear and just bouncing off the limiter through the first of 2 double right-handers, and just look at how much speed they can carry.
Yeah, it's interesting how sparing they are with the gear shifts there. Almost as if they're doing a challenge to limit the amount of gear shifts they're doing, just holding it through 5th the entire way through. But 5th gear corners in these cars are absolutely mental in terms of imagine the G-forces doing this in real life. Goodness me, that would be very, very straining indeed. But relatively straining on these tyres, I think, is the only thing you've got to worry about here, and even then we're a 45-minute race. They'll be absolutely fine despite the pit stop we'll have to make. So it's such an interesting challenge round here. As I said earlier, these cars must be an absolute joy round here.
It doesn't look half bad, does it? By the way, LMP2 haven't really touched much on them, but your race leader Oskari Sarainen is just continuing to build his advantage. He's now 2 seconds in front of Dylan Bittman and then Morten Agerson, before you find then Tom Schneider, Mike Page, the rest of your top 5 as they continue to run. GTDs as well have settled in as the top 5 run away and stretch their legs at the front, still waiting for the first cycle of traffic, which don't think we're far away from seeing as well. So I think your GTP leaders probably going to be onto the back of the GTD field within the next 2 laps or so.
I think it'd be shorter than that. I reckon even by the end of this one. There you are. There's someone there, and we are into the traffic indeed for Svensson. So this is where the real race begins. We've had 7 minutes of clean running for these leaders, but now the real racing begins, and already Sam Michaels makes up some ground. He'll have to make a dive down the inside at turn 10 though, and that will lose a 10th or so. And so now the give and take, now the interest, now the survival for a lot of these drivers.
Just listen to the patience there from Michaels as he was trying to wind the car up but couldn't. As soon as you get enough on power, the hybrid will spool in, and Michaels was trying to prevent that kicking in too early. Up the inside of a Lamborghini as Svensson gets checked up behind a Porsche, and allows Michaels the chance to bring it back in just that little bit within a couple of car lengths as we head back towards the line. Only a handful of the GTDs worked past so far. Last lap time before traffic was in the 132s or so for your race leader. This time by 33.795, and they only again had to work through a couple of cars.
Yeah, I'd imagine we'll be in the 34s with this lap based on what we've just seen. Look at how thick the traffic is. Svensson even going down the inside at turn 3. Not advisable, I've got to say, but sometimes aggression is needed at this point, and he's trying to just keep a GT between himself and Michaels. It's not really possible though. He seems to be looking up the inside of every corner. I wouldn't advise that particularly. He's better off hanging back on one of the two of these occasions so far.
Oh, that was, I don't think, a look of commitment, more of a look of show yourself in the mirror. We'll go either side of the traffic. Svensson chose wrong, tried to go driver's right, and now new race leader. It is the Movano driver of Sam Michaels, who's #1 car up the inside through the second of the Arrabbiatas, now with almost a full second lead on his former rival.
And that's exactly why I said moments before, Svensson can't be affording to look down the inside on every corner, and that's exactly why. You're not going to make it through on every corner. You've got to remember these GTs are a lot more difficult to work through these corners. I bet I've been speaking about the GTPs being a joy to drive through the chicanes. I bet the GTDs certainly aren't. It's a very, very different car to drive around here, and that's a prime example of why you can't look for an overtake on every turn.
Well, I think outside of that, Ruben Lasso's had an issue, but traffic hasn't been too bad for anyone in the field. Here comes Curtis Webb on defense from Simone Ucera as through the final quarter, a long left-hand, the track falls away from you. They will continue their battle back towards the line. George Brabner's getting back into the thick of things with Paul Jouffreau 3 wide with a Porsche all the way to the pit wall and trying to stay out of dodge. Last of the late breakers into turn 1. Brabner tries to fend off the move into the corner, but that's a big lunge from Jouffreau, who gets on through.
Well, you can get away with it at turn 1. It's a pretty wide turn, and so it allows racing exactly like that. Fantastic between the two of them, and so Jouffreau will go through. Brabner with the exit though, and even I think that was a bit of a flash of the lights as well on the way towards turn 4, but no chance through there, and they'll have to restack and try again a little bit later. Great racing so far, and as you say, relatively clean too.
Let's see if now, as we get towards the end of GTDs, is something else going to go wrong. I was worried. It's George Brabner into the kitty litter, but I got to say, credit where credit's due, holds on to it, and now is going to rejoin in what is hopefully a pretty safe fashion. GTD cars hold up high, drivers left, and Brabner now down to 14th, but at least still in the fighting. That's all you can really hope for. More drivers got entangled up, by the way. I think Fabio Ciamballa, as well as Ryan O'Connor, went off at the very same part of the track.
They've gone off together. I think Shorter may have gotten in the back of Brabner, by the way, when he went off in the gravel there. I'm not entirely sure, or maybe it was just an aggressive snap, but it was so aggressive it looked like he was hit in the rear, but we'll find out. Oh dear, this is a real mess down. Oh no, that is a real mess down the hill, unfortunately. We were saying how well it was going, and this is not going well at all. Or that didn't, I should say.
Let's see if we can clear up first what happens with Brabner. So this is riding on board with Shorter. And oh no, that is a vicious wiggle all by himself. Maybe shows the perils of getting onto the curbs just a little bit too much. And I love the quick camera pan over, just a chaos.
What a mess this is. It's down the inside, and I'm not even sure how that really happened. But
that's the 11, isn't it, of Christian Moore that's already gone around.
And he looks to have suspension damage the way that snapped around again. But it may be as a result of this. So it's he's kind of spin on his own there. So he's got into the back of the GTD in front of him, spun in front of a train of GTPs who have in fact had nowhere to go.
The more we look through this incident, the more layers it has. It's quite like an onion in that regard. There's Ryan O'Connor, who just gets absolutely,
I didn't spot that,
pincered into in the left rear, excuse me, and that's clearly a GTP that's done at that point. And well, we had 48 cars that were running a while ago. I'm pretty sure we'll be down to at most 45, and we'll have to keep the count moving from there. It has opened up, though, as a result of A, that, and B, plenty of other moments in traffic. GTP really now stretched on outside of your leading gap, still only 1.2 between Michaels and Svensson. 4 seconds back to third, another almost 4 seconds back to fifth. Margins opened up.
Yeah, and that's exactly what you get from the opening round of traffic here, especially at Mugello. It really does take a strain on the gaps, and it will have done in GTD as well. There's already 10 seconds back, even if you're outside the top 5 at this stage. You're already 10 seconds off the leader. So that's exactly sort of what I was talking about earlier on with that regard. The LMP2 seem to have caught up the GTPs very quickly, and unfortunately already incidents being caused.
Pretty sure that was the ATRS machine and Morten Agerson. So third place in class, not having a clean run through traffic by any means. That's suboptimal, to quote Sir Lewis McLeod. There's Fabio Ciamballa still trying to bring a car missing a front end back down to pit lane, and as the LMP2 now streak on past, your leader is gone. He is had been gone at one point, and I think now, I'm not sure if that's traffic related, Ewan has now got a real battle in his rearview mirror to worry about.
It looks like it. It may have been down to traffic. I mean, for these LMP2s, it's a little bit different to what we just saw, because the GTDs have had that first run through. They will be slightly more experienced, of course, as a result of that. And the gaps between them, as I just mentioned earlier, are a little bit bigger too. So maybe that has helped these LMP2s work their way on through. But in the end, sometimes there's nothing you can do about whether you lose time or gain it in traffic.
Riding on board with your race leader in class, as he's going to get to the inside of one GT3 machine before the second of the right-handers. He's in fourth gear there. Your main challenger in class just directly behind and slipping up the inside in the Leica Esports colours. So that's Dylan Pittman that has worked his way on forward, as from what my timing screen is trying to tell me, there's been plenty more chaos further down through the field.
I'm not surprised that there has been. It's one of those circuits that does create it. That was a bit of a strange line from the second place GTD car there, Julian Fernandez, but he seems okay. In towards turn 9, that was awkward. You've got to remember in a prototype that GTs can't hold a tight line like you can.
Oh, and then we played bumper car. Oh, it just never stopped, did it? And there's a Porsche that's just parked, and that I think is day done for Miguel Cuesta in that GTD category. So the rejoin back onto track wasn't great, and we just watched them all pile into one another.
And rear wing gone and everything there. So that was a comedy of errors, really. This shouldn't have even happened to start with. You can't go around the outside there, as I mentioned. We believe it's Cuesta with no rear wing. And then someone on our right, I don't know why he drives into him again, but anyway, someone on our right of that shot, as that was happening, drove into another GTD at the same time. It was a real domino effect.
And so dominoes have fallen, and 48 starters, probably whittled down to maybe just 40 running at this point. Would not be entirely shocked and make that maybe 39, because George Brabham is going to be riding about this one from pit lane.
It's quite dark. I can't see any damage to his car, but maybe it's not so obvious at this stage. It does look like we've lost 3 of the GTPs then from the field, at least from the front group. Brabner's already dropping himself through the LMP2s, and Jan Korp's already into pit lane as well. This can't be strategical, you wouldn't imagine.
Let's take a look at the that car had just already broken, it would seem, and then as he tries to work out of the kitty litter for, I think, what's the umpteenth time in the last couple of laps, car clearly not looking in a healthy state. Back up front, let's check in with your leaders then with 15 minutes complete. So 28 minutes or so to run. We'll expect them down to pit lane and give or take 10 to 15 more minutes or so. Zone after the small mistake through traffic hasn't let it break him, and that's an important thing, because it's so easy to make a mistake, even easier to let it eat you up.
It is, and Sam Michaels is doing a very good job at just alleviating this pressure at the moment, diverting it a little bit and holding on to this lead well, but you would expect it from the driver of the number 1. They're getting back into traffic again now, so let's see how they deal with it second time round. Svenson's going to need a better run of it through here, and he's going to need to drive a little bit better through it, to be honest, than the first time round as well, because the mistake that led to him losing the lead was of his own doing.
Yeah, so often though we talk about the fact that in traffic it's experience that makes the difference, right? And so that's experience you can only get in racing. Sam Michaels, 8,592 iRating, someone that has been a competitor now in our IMSA Esports Global Championship for 2 years, in the GTD, in the touring car and in the GTP category. Svensson, only 4,900 iRating, which is still more than most will have on iRacing here, but it's maybe still lacking a little bit of experience. And when you come to an unfamiliar track like this, Ewan, at least compared to a Sebring, compared to a Daytona, that lack of experience can sometimes be even more crucial.
Yeah, and it can really show as well. So maybe that's what we're seeing at the moment, but it is hard to know, because realistically, reading out the R ratings there, they've probably done the same amount of races as well, but they're into the thousands, the two of them. But anyway, they should have a relative amount of experience, maybe not around here. Michael's clearly dealing with it pretty well. He's just at the moment in that stage where he's always having a GT between himself and his closest rival, and that is quite helpful mentally. It's also quite helpful for the gap, which has grown by about 3 tenths or so in a lap.
Through the long right-hander before that interesting chicane. Now Michaels has to go alongside with a Porsche. That's going to cost him just a tenth or two. Not ideal by any means, but will give him a little bit more clean air into the final hairpin, where Svensson gets a little bit crossed up with a Porsche. The 41 tries to go up high, and unfortunately Tim Van Spronsen not working the same way as Svensson, who has now gone driver's right and committed early to a trip down pit lane.
Yeah, I like this call from Svensson. Get out of the traffic and see what you can do in cleaner air. Now, there is the danger that he actually comes out behind the LMP2s, and so the problem is not solved. But we'll see on the exit. He's going to drive all the way down to the very, very end of pit lane. Now we'll stop, get up on the jacks. I wasn't expecting that, but anyway, he will certainly be taking on a little bit of fuel hit. We'll see how many tyres he does as well, if he does any.
It's a lengthy stop. 14, 15 seconds and counting. Not sure exactly if this is to plan. Traditionally, you would not expect them to be stationary for any longer than about 14 seconds. Jan Korbs, just to give you a benchmark, was 13.6 seconds. So Svensson is off and away, but with a 24-second pit stop. I don't think that was necessarily all according to the written plan.
Maybe didn't uncheck tyres or something, I don't know. But maybe he thinks it's worth it. Surely it doesn't around a race of this length. No, it's a high-speed circuit and it's a pretty sunny day, but nevertheless, you don't really want to be changing tyres in these races by any means. So that's a bit of a surprise. It's cost him what we're going to presume is about 10 seconds. If we're taking Jan Korbs' time as sort of Samuel Michaels, it might well sort of line up. And if so, the gap's going to be about 10 seconds, which is not really what you want to see, but Michaels is already into the pit lane sort of copying that strategy.
Seems as though drivers needing the fuel as well. You can see your GTD leader, Julian Fernandez, has gotten past Mark Schruller, now trying to build an advantage in that Porsche, but now we'll just wait to see where Sam Michaels is going to stack up relative to the pit stop from Alessandro Svensson. Svensson heading through the long right-hander in the final sector, so still that chicane, the long left-hand hairpin before he can work back to the line, and so Michaels has been sitting stationary for 16 seconds and still counting, so clearly there was something to be said about the strategy call to go a little bit longer. 22.6 is the total stop time for Michaels at the end of the day. He will go off and away and be clear of Svensson behind, but maybe not all completely wrong in terms of strategy.
No, it makes you wonder what Jan Korbs has been doing, to be honest, but either way, it's the gap for the race now between Michaels and Svensson, and there it is, 3 seconds or so. It will have extended by about 1.1 if we're going to take those pit stop times. So Michaels once again, it looks a bit shorter than 3 seconds actually, that doesn't it? No, it is around 3. So that's a bit of catching up to do, Jim House, for Svensson. He's going to struggle to do that, I would imagine, but still half the race to go.
Still plenty of time, and he will have the opportunity now as well on this lap in particular, where his tyres are closer into their operating window to be able to just put it all together, close that margin. It's already down to 2.5 as Sam Michaels checked up behind that Lamborghini, albeit momentarily. You were also correct in assuming that the LMP2 cars would not be too far behind these GTP cars who have pitted. Oskari Sarainen still leads from Dylan Bittman by 1.5 seconds. That margin still worth keeping an eye on, and just wondering when your leaders in class will end up coming down pit lane, because if the GTPs are thinking the strategy is going to see them down to pit lane sooner rather than later, LMP2s are usually even in that similar sort of a ballpark.
Yeah, look, normally, but I think some of these pit stops in GTP have been a bit more tactical rather than anything else, just because of the traffic. But that remains to be seen, really. We've still got 4 drivers yet to make a pit stop at the front of this race, so clearly these GTPs can go a little bit further than what most of the field have done so far. But some of the disparities in terms of pit stop time have been quite wild so far, really. Alex Noga's only done 14 seconds in the box. Joffrow only 13, as well as Korbs. Guggenmeier has done 16 seconds. It's all very odd.
And so now LMP2 pit stops are underway, although I've seen 3 drivers, Bittman, Schneider and Page, elect to stay out there and go an additional lap beyond what the rest of the drivers in class have thought wise. So Saarinen followed in by Morten Agerson, by Christian Pereira, and off and away after a 23-second pit stop effectively. Saarinen going to, of course, get out in front of Agerson, and it will be status quo between the two of them as they roll off and away. GTD is probably not due a pit stop anytime soon. They will go longest of any of the classes available. But when it comes down to these drivers also in terms of thinking when are the prototypes going to lap them, not in a bad spot right now. You would stay out there punching some laps with clean air and then give it a couple of laps when your prototypes begin to roll back around. Someone may think there's a gamble.
Yeah, I think now that we're in the second half of the race as well, it might well be worth that. And there we go. There goes a prototype through on the inside. But also, I feel like the prototypes are so spread out at this stage that you're actually not going to find any bit of free track space in the field anymore. I mean, the gap from 1st to 10th in LMP2 is 1:11. There's 30 seconds covering the top 10 in GTP. There's some big gaps out there now, and I just don't see there being many pockets of fresh air really in GTD. It's probably better focusing on your own race and not everyone else's.
Dylan Bittman comes down to pit lane in the LMP2 battles, so it's going to be an important pit stop. He's all the way at the end of pit lane, so it's not ideal for him by any means to now complete the pit stop and then have to wait an age to find out whether he actually emerges alongside his main competitor, Oskari Saarinen. Sheldon Muscat's going to go a lap longer than the rest as you see pit stops underway for a handful of the other LMP2 machines. Already, though, Bittman rolling 14 seconds stationary compares to 22.8 seconds for Oskari Saarinen. So there's going to be another split in strategy, this time in the LMP2 class. It's going to be the new race leaders heading off of the lane.
Some bizarre strategy things happening today. I think it's is an understatement. Bittman out in the lead, and that's going to be a relatively big margin as well. Straight into traffic, which is not ideal. Traffic which has got a bit of damage, clearly been in the wars so far today. And so what's the corrected gap going to be? About 6 seconds or so. That's going to take some catching for Saarinen, who has certainly the longer end of a pit stop, really, if you look at the field as an average.
Yeah, now, not many in the LMP2 class going the same as Oskari with that long stop, and so I think that indicates that maybe it's slightly unusual. Morten Agerson, one of the few other drivers to elect for the longest stop and potentially doing a bit more of a tyre change. That Porsche is not looking very healthy, and so it stays hard left as Saarinen just continues on his merry way. Check back in with some GTPs, by the way, as they fight through traffic. Jan Korbs went a little bit deep through the corner, and watches Thiago Rodriguez tries to switch it back and get back underneath.
That was a bit of a suicidal re-entry to the circuit there, very early apex, but round the outside, and a great move in the end from Rodriguez to get up into 7th position. Good move around there, but Jan Korbs seems all out of sorts at the moment, all at sea, and surely Bautas Tureci will be able to get through into 8th place pretty soon as well.
Maybe this is part of the reason why we did see longer stops for a handful. Jan Korbs was amongst those that went for the shorter stop, just 13.6 seconds stationary, so maybe that slightly caught him out. Chris Shorter's come in from 2nd in GTP. He's just left Jack Booser out front, who is yet to make a pit stop in the class. LMP2 still Sheldon Muscat, Mikhail Mercica, and Marcin Martinovic, who are yet to make their mandatory trips down to the lane. Jan Korbs increasingly under fire from a very purple Acura that's now going to go the long way around. Got a passing zone surely through the final corner.
Well, if you can get to the inside there, it's a passing place, but not really hanging it all the way around the outside. A very, very long final corner around here at Mugello. You're much better getting the run off, as he has done here, and looking for that move towards the inside of turn 1, or indeed the outside for Tureci. Let's see which one he chooses. Had no choice really, but he won't be complaining. He'll get down the inside and he will get to 8th.
Nice little pass there. And now as these GTPs begin to settle back into their battles after pit stop, Julian Fernandez left out front because Mark Struhl has made his trip down to pit lane. 12.8 seconds stationary. As a lap or so ago. A couple more cars came in this lap. Chris Fooley, Tim van Spronsen as well. And that Ferrari trying to go a little bit longer and just extend its advantage up front.
Now, I do wonder what the thinking is behind both of these at the moment, both the early stop and the late one, because as I said earlier, the field's so spread out now that I don't really feel like there's an advantage or disadvantage to either. There's the gap in real time, and is there any sort of benefit to staying out here? I'm not sure. To be fair, if I was Fernandez and I was the one following, I might well leave it a lap or two, with the Porsche having pitted first and then come in. You don't want to do exactly the same thing, but also you don't want to be apart from your main rival for ages, because strange things can happen there. If you can see them on the road and you're with them, then nothing strange can happen in that you're not seeing, and they can't find any speed that you're not having either.
Lights are flashing from Schruller as he's now being caught behind one of the Audis, so I believe that's Casper Ullmann, and not sure what happened to him, but I'm assuming probably tangled up through the melee that we saw slightly earlier. Almost into the final 15 minutes then of this one, so 30 minutes about to be complete as the two head drivers right this time by. The Zenith Racing machine stays out there as an Acura pulls out of the draft and now works down into that opening corner. Check back in with some of the GTPs. Paul Jouffreau, another one of the drivers who went with the shorter pit stop, under fire from Thiago Rodriguez, who's really making a charge forward at this stage of the race.
He is moving forward quite well, and notably had a longer stop as well, so maybe there's a correlation there, but not so obvious in the dirty air of the fast corners through the middle sector at Mugello. Let's see if he can make a difference in the final sector a little bit more, especially with that traffic in front of Jouffreau. Very close in towards turn 10. That was too close really for comfort, and in the end, I think it's surrounding, isn't it? Didn't want to give an inch there.
That even might be Alexei Nogue in the number 4 machine. It looks very weird because no, you're right. I'm just still not feeling great, so I can't tell an LMP2 between a GTP. Look how big-brained I am. They finally get on path.
Oh.
It was the 43 machine, so Christian Pereira, and that's a mistake as Pereira tried to fight maybe a little bit too hard. It's cost these drivers a little bit of time.
What on earth was that about? I've got no idea. Surely they must have had some previous, because that was just weird into the final corner. Why is an LMP2 you dive down the inside? I've got no idea, but it's set up this battle now. A very late defence from Jouffreau, and it's going to be all the way around the outside. Oh no! Oh, big spin, unfortunately, for Jouffreau on the outside, and he loses all the positions in one go.
Got to assume it's probably related on some level to the lack of lengthy pit stops for some, because once that car went around, it didn't seem like they had much chance of really holding on to it. So let's cycle back the replay. Let's first try and take another look at what was happening with that LMP2 car. Christian Pereira already had just a little bit of damage to the front, and so as they began to work their way on through, contact was made into the braking zone, and then Pereira just tried to absolutely send it.
He was never going to make the corner, even on his own. Never mind diving down the inside of someone. So I don't know what that was all about at all, but the LMP2 ends up in the gravel, and it sets up this battle in towards turn number 1. Jouffreau on the very outside of Alex Nogue into turn 1, and he tries to go right the way round, gets a bit too wide, and goes in with a bit too much speed as well, actually.
Yeah, did a decent job of minimising the pain. You've got to say at the end of the day, that could have been a whole lot bigger. Back to your GTDs, let's check in with them as Julian Fernandez off of pit lane and still in front of Mark Schruller, but by a relatively tame margin, all things considered. We jump on board with second spot. Traffic's going to be continuing to close behind. There's the Ferrari being chased down. In terms of pit stop time, basically identical, Ewan, from cone to cone, so it's only been on track where there's been any difference.
Yeah, I guess the Zenith driver Fernandez, dear me, has
been one of those days.
Making a difference on lower fuel, I guess, out there on his own. Clearly a bit of free track space. I wouldn't say that Schurler's been in loads of... Where's he gone? He's been off the road. Those two prototypes have passed him and unfortunately discarded him to the outside. So unfortunately this GTD battle is not going to be what we've been promised at the end of the day. But yeah, that lower fuel run from the Ferrari may have got in the trap position that could have taken him to the flag anyway.
Well, it was going to be interesting, and it wasn't. We'll go back, we'll take a look at the replay. Here it is. So it's the red Porsche that's going to go off driver's right, I would assume. Oh, as that's your race leader closing from behind, but Sam Michaels probably had a decent view of all of that. Nothing that he necessarily did of his own, just to be clear.
No, it's the LMP2 just ahead of him who does it. Down the inside. Is there contact there, or does Shirley just steer out of the corner? Either way, he ends up in the gravel and loses 3 seconds, so I guess it doesn't actually matter which one happened, but either way, that may well be the race unless there's something similar that happens to the Ferrari in the lead.
I think we've got both of our, or all three of our classes rather, basically locked in terms of our race winners. Michael's 5 seconds clear of Sveen Sohn. Dylan Bittman still about 4 seconds clear of Oskari Sarainen, so that margin not really closing at a rapid rate. It's more traffic assisted than anything right now. Still waiting for Marjan Martinovic to make his final pit stop with less than 11 minutes left on this clock. And of course, we've been talking Julian Fernandez now clear of Mark Schruller after a slight slip up in terms of traffic. Doesn't mean there's not fighting as GTPs work their way through on LMP2s. It's the battle for fourth position that goes back 3 cars.
It looks good in LMP2 at the moment. Tom Schneider leading the way ahead of Morten Christian Axon, and then Mike Page in the 6th position. And a bit of a disruptive GTP, I think it's fair to say, just up in front of Schneider as well. So Axon will get down the inside at turn 12, and the ATRS driver will get to 4th.
Nice little move. These P2s, of course, all identical in terms of specification. We're not in the same situation as we were at the Rolex 24 this year, where we had at least 2 different chassis being run. The all-purple machine has just gone past Alex Nogues, so that's been a switch around finally for 4th position. Thiago Rodriguez going to come under pressure now to try and run away before Balázs Torozoy can really close and start to make it a fight for the final step of the podium.
Yeah, might be just achieving that at the moment as well, just over a second, especially if Alex Nogue gets the inside here. Oh, that was close. Well, he's certainly going to be put off by that. He needed a bit of grass on the way towards turn 1 to survive in the end, but it didn't turn into anything, thankfully. So that's going to cement Balázs Torozoy's position in 4th place, but as you say, as Rodriguez already flown away here in 3rd, he may well have done with 9 minutes left.
Yeah, 1.7 seconds your margin, and still a gap behind to worry about. I think it's trending one way more than the other, albeit with short time remaining, and anything could happen with traffic still very much a factor. LMP2, keep an eye on them, because as much as I was thinking that Bittman may have had the advantage in hand, Sarainen closing fast, now within 1.5, and he's looking to ka-chow his way on forward relatively quickly, you'd have to think. But given that Bittman's got track position through traffic, all he's got to do is really frustrate as Martinovic down to pit lane.
Yeah, so this will be for the actual lead now, and it may well not be over just yet. I think of all the leads that may well change, this is the one. This is the big candidate. And by the way, I can't explain to you how annoying it is that Sarainen's driving a car with 95 stickers all over it, but it's not actually. That annoys me more than you get annoyed by zeros in numbers. It's so irritating.
Have you noticed that we, just of clarity for the viewers, Ewan and myself both commentate on the digital Nürburgring Endurance Series. Did you notice how irritated I've gotten with a certain team that isn't their team name, has number 50, but on the entry list in sim and in reality are meant to have the number 47?
I did notice, because last time you made it. Well, I've noticed it for the first time at the last round because you mentioned it.
Yeah, I got really sick of it.
It is annoying, yeah. It seems to be a problem in the NASCAR community quite prevalently, but clearly it's a problem here too.
The NASCAR community loves their custom numbers, except in iRacing, you don't often get to pick your number in official races. So if anyone's wondering why we don't use custom number paints for the Daytona 500 coming up in a few weeks' time, that's why. It's because we need your numbers to match what's actually on our timing screens, so that everyone's brains don't melt. Bittman's got 1.1 seconds once again, though, to the number 30 machine, back towards the line. 7 minutes left to go, and here comes the fight for the lead.
Yeah, it's come down again on this last lap. Sarainen on the lap before this, by the way, Saarinen was a lot quicker, 2.2 seconds on the previous lap to this one. The gap hasn't come down quite so severely on this lap. Maybe a legacy of slightly less traffic, but 4/10 is a significant chunk, and there are going to be 4 or 5 laps for these guys remaining, depending on where the leaders are. That is more than enough time for Saarinen to catch up.
Which way does he go? Into the gravel's the answer for a moment. Loses a handful of momentum, but gathers it back up. He's going to have to now shape around the outside of the number 16 GTD, gets a bit of a wiggles, lost him even more momentum as he tried to pass Miguel Cuesta. And there goes your race leader. The Movano entry of Sam Michaels has got another lap on these LMP2 drivers. Important because now it gives a bit more clarity as to how many laps these leaders have to do.
Yeah, 4 at the line for these leaders in LMP2, so and the leader indeed for the overall race as well. So Samuel Michaels is going to put both of these a lap down. He won't get round to lap them all over again, and so it will be 4 laps to go for these two. And on average, Saarinen probably needs half a second a lap in terms of bringing this gap down at the moment. But the advantage, or maybe disadvantage, that he's got is that the entire GTP field, or most of it, will come through on them in these final 5 minutes.
Sam Michaels very patient there in working past the 17, and so now the Lippert Esport car trying to get the momentum, get the draft behind your race-leading Acura as back towards the line they will run. 4 to go, as mentioned. It's a 1.5 second margin re-established between the two LMP2 contenders. LMP2's battling further down, by the way, as well. Martinovic out of pit lane, directly into fight with Mikel Marcicia, but of course with these two drivers relatively undamaged from the battles that they've had before, they've also got 4 laps with which to go as the GTP runs wide. Very
wide into the final corner there. That was Jack Buser in the 15 car, just ahead of Jan Korbs, who has dropped down to 8th place. He's just making his way through now, slaloming through the LMP2s. But yeah, Martinovic has just made that pit stop now, and so is back out there on the circuit. Shortest pit stop of anyone, by the way, in LMP2 for Martinovic, having stayed out so long. Clearly no time for tyres for him.
So as Korbs and Buser get their battle sorted out, at least for the time being, because both of the LMP2 cars are going to blitz past the 15 of Buser on the run into the left-hander. Chris Shorter, I can tell you, has had to come back down to pit lane. Not sure if that was damage related or penalty related, whatever the case is though. Suboptimal for the lone BMW in the field of otherwise Acuras that dominate in GTP racing. Here on iRacing has been somewhat of a trend, somewhat of a consistent theme as well. LMP2 leaders, Dylan Bittman still leads by 1.5 seconds from the number 30 of Oskari Saarinen as they come back towards the line. 3 laps to go this time by.
Yeah, and that gap has not come down at all. The sort of gap in terms of pace between the two levelling off here, and Bittman is still able to keep a car between himself and Saarinen. At some points he was probably hoping to do the same at turn 1, but it's not going to happen. He'll have to go round the outside and do it at turn 2 instead. And Saarinen will have to do a little bit better with that Porsche, but it's not going to be a pass from this distance. He needs to get a lot closer, and he needs to do it quickly as well if he wants some chances to go through.
Running out of time at this point, you'd have to think 3 minutes to go. Short time in the race, that's for sure. Buser had a very short pit stop, by the way. I think that's what's leading to the relative lack of speed that he maybe has at this juncture, and so as behind him, 3 wide they go. GTPs, LMP2s overlapping, intermingling. Got Meyer, Nucera, Declan Webb. Those are all cars involved in this GTP fight that we have to keep an eye on. The 6 of Gottmeier now behind Jack Buser, and he tries to just get a better run off the corner. Something's not right in that number 15. I can't quite tell what it is. It's not got the gumps, the get up and go that you'd expect as chaos behind. Oh my goodness.
It's not got the what? The
get up and go. I was trying to get there.
The gumps. It's like Gumpfmeier's name, if that's what he was sort of firing himself up for, you know. But anyway, that's bad joke. I don't know what is holding Buser up at the moment, but clearly something is wrong, as you say. It could just be the tyres, to be honest. It's such a short pit stop. He's clearly not changed any, and he could have just worn through them at this stage, and he's really struggling. But he's like a panda on ice, isn't he? He's going nowhere very quickly. Simone Nucera is going to go through here surely soon, although not immediately into turn 12. Look at the struggle to even get turned in. What a nightmare.
It's almost like he was trying to go off and do that long lap penalty that they have to go do in MotoGP when you've done something bad, except that's just how bad the grip is. So 2 positions lost in the space of a corner as Webb filters through as well. Now work back towards the line, and it is 2 laps to go for them, because here comes your race leader, Sam Michaels, who would see the white flag this time at the line. So 1 more lap for him to go after he completes this one around the outside of Casper Ullmann. And it's an LMP2 car, a GTD to navigate through. That's your race-leading GTD car. So Julian Fernandez will also get the white flag this time by. Nice to have some finality to this race.
Yeah, and so they'll know exactly what they've got left now. And I think as well, the good thing for us is the fact that Fernandez and Schürrle have maintained a similar gap. So I think even if Schürrle didn't have that problem, he would have maintained a frustrating 1 second behind for us, which is, I'll take. Because I don't think we actually missed out on any on-track fighting. They just would have been a bit closer together.
So out of the final corner, race leader heads for the penultimate time. White flag will be in hand, and 29 laps will be complete at Mugello. If Sam Michaels can hold on and see the checkered flag. He's got 12 seconds behind, nice, tidy, and a large, nice gap to enjoy. He's enjoyed his trip here and channeled some of the Movano spirit. Here's the battle behind, though. Back over to 8th, 9th, and 10th positions. Dylan Bittman enjoys a 2-second lead over Oskari Sarainen in the LMP2 class, so keeping an eye on that, but it's not really started to close just yet. These drivers have got traffic to work through as well, so 3 cars, going to be an exciting fight for them. 1 lap to go. Gottmeyer has gone off wide.
And now he's got no grip on the front end either. These GTPs really struggling here, and thankfully for everybody, I think they're going to get through most of this lap traffic on the straight, because I feel like if it was in the corners, we would all be having a real nightmare here. They're all going to weave one way then the other. They're not even agreeing on which side to pass some of these GTs, but as soon as they get into the turn, they're actually not that much quicker than the GTDs, especially through turn 1, but Goodmeyer especially seems to have sorted his front end out now.
Maybe it was just a little bit over deep into the corner, especially with how the braking works in these cars. You're trying to, of course, regenerate some energy at the same time as actually slowing the car down. So you're trying to balance those 2 different sort of command ethoses for the car. Here comes your race leader, though. It's been an interesting one for Sam Michaels on the outside of the front row at the start of the race, but the first to see the checkered flag, a veteran's drive to be wise in traffic, to be wise in strategy, and defend them all off behind. 13 seconds will be the margin of victory for the Movano sim racing driver. And now we'll wait to have to see Julian Fernandez next up in terms of the GTD class win in front of Mark Schürrle. So the Ferrari 296 comes out on top in its GTD category. And just in front, Dylan Bittman just fends off Oskari Sarainen by 9/10 of a second. Strategy worked a treat to see the 17 rise to the top.
Yeah, he did very well on the strategy, but also did very well towards the end of that race there too. There was one stage where he was getting reeled in at a real alarming rate by Sarainen, and he weathered that storm. At the end it got to 1 second or so, and then it never came down any further than that, and Bittman has to take a bit of credit for that, for just stemming the tide of that one and holding on to a race win in the closest class by some distance.
So, as we wait for the final driver to see the checkered flag, I hope they actually start to do more multi-class racing at Mugello, because it's not bad actually. It's not necessarily something that you traditionally think is well suited to this sort of a layout, but if the drivers make it work, boy, does it work.
Yeah, I think we should see some series come here in the future, but it's always difficult. I mean, we only had 48 here today, and it felt pretty busy. Imagine a series with the full complement of 60 odd drivers out on this circuit. It would feel very, very claustrophobic indeed. So it's going to be a difficult one to justify for some, I think, but I personally hope we see more of this circuit, definitely.
At least the damage bills are virtual, not real. That's the only positive thing I guess we can say in support of more races here. Quick look at the results before we wrap things up here on Friday Night Primetime in our coverage of the IMSA iRacing Championship. Mentioned it was a sea of Acuras, and Sam Michaels in that Movano sim racing entry victorious over Alessandro Sfinzone. That winning margin around 12.5 seconds. Thiago Rodriguez holds on to third, just in front of Balish Tarotroy, and then Paul Giuffreau round out the top 5. Alex Noguet, Jan Korbs, and then Simone Nucera, Declan Webb, and Dominic Goldmeyer, the rest of your top 10. Down in 11th, Alexei Seleznev, Jack Booster, Hendrik Ibsen, Ruben Lasso, and then Curtis Webb make up the rest of the top 15. All scored on the leading lap, while Chris Shorter 1 lap down with a double pit stop. Edward Middleton, 17th for him, and then Ryan O'Connor, Fabio Cimbala got to the end. Unfortunately, DNFs for George Brabner, as well as for, in the other classes, a couple more. Only 20, of course, in that GTP class. LMP2s, Dylan Bittman, Oskari, Sarainen split by less than a second at the line, but what a battle it was between them in the closing laps. Morten Agerson grabs the final step on the podium with Mike Page, Michael Machia, and then Sheldon Muscat, Patrick Rathart, and then Marjan Martinovic, Tom Schneider, and Felix Rupert, the rest of the top 10. 11th for Christian Pereira in the final of the Dallara LMP2 machines. Julian Fernandez, Mark Schruller, and Obed Salmon, the podium finishers in GTDs, 2 Ferraris, being able to fend off plenty of Porsches with Federico Crisafulli, Lemmy Mishka, Aaron Quinn, Takahiro Kubo, Tim Van Spronsen, Thomas Seyfarth, and Mitten Kurdas, making up your top 10 in the category. On the leading lap as well for Rafael Rafalski, for Fabian Alex, but 2 laps down for Aidan Campbell, as well as for Miguel Cuesta, and then Casper Ullman, Jack Thompson, and Christian Moore, all seeing various bits of trouble on their way to the end. After this, it's a trip over to, well, another relatively unfamiliar track, you'd have to think, for multi-class racing, as well for these drivers. It's to Aragon before we go to more familiar tracks to close things off. Circuit Gilles Villeneuve, as well as over to Silverstone. Ewan, it should be an interesting close to this first season in 2024.
Yeah, 3 of these final 4 rounds, including this one, of course, are a bit odd in terms of multi-class racing. Mugello, we've seen, has been turned out pretty decently. I've not actually seen much multi-class racing at Aragon, but I guess ELMS goes there and so on. But we'll take things up a little level with these cars, certainly. And then Montreal, which really doesn't see very much multi-class racing at all. That is certainly going to be a challenge in 2 weeks' time. So a challenging end to the season, but the finale at least returns to some familiar turf, as some familiar turf, I should say, as some reprieve at the end.
Should be interesting, of course, I think, when we go to Circuit Gilles Villeneuve, given that it is effectively a street circuit, right? So it's going to give those tight confines, those unforgiving elements that the drivers will just be keeping in their minds on, and I can only imagine how stressful it is going to be for them. That's, of course, still yet to come. After that, a new build will come from our team at iRacing that I'm sure will deliver plenty more content, and who knows what more fun can be sprinkled into future Friday Night Primetime events. For now, though, it's time to say goodbye. Don't forget you can stay connected to us by following us on social media at RaceSpotTV. But for Ewan O'Leary alongside myself, Arjuna Kankipati, we appreciate you joining us here at Circuit Mugello for something slightly unusual. Multi-class racing at Mugello. It was fun, it was chaotic, and ultimately, Sam Michaels, Dylan Bittman, Julian Fernandez able to hold on to victory in the IMSA iRacing Championship here on Friday Night Primetime. We'll see you next time. Goodbye for now.